Hello, I want to welcome you to the Extraordinary and Empowering Parenting Show. I'm your host, Olga, and CEO of the Entrepreneurial Mom Business Coaching. Is there one thing we have in common as a parents? Is the desire to raise happy, courageous, confident kids who thrive. That's the part of a reason we build our own businesses, right? Because we believe doing so will give us the freedom and flexibility to be there with our children. And because this is so important to us, we sometimes question whatever we're doing, absolutely everything we can do to be the best parents for our children. The purpose of this online show is to gather experts' advices for parentpreneurs to strike the balance, raising happy, confident kids and growing successful business. I'm so glad you're here with us today. You're about to meet our special guest, Glenn. Hi, Glenn.
Hello, Olga. Nice to be with you.
Thank you so much for being here with us today.
You're welcome.
Glenn is an expert, an author, musician, an experienced clinical hypnotherapist who has...
Hypnotherapist.
Yes, sorry, hypnotherapist. Who has helped thousands of clients over a wide range of stress-related problems. English is my second language, so I always mess something up. But
Yes.
Tell us, where are you from? And I know you're tuning in on a different time zone from us too.
Yes, I'm in southern Spain. So I'm on Central Eastern time. I live just along the coast from Malaga, and it's a beautiful part of the world. You know, it's I grew up in London, when I was young. So it's a real, literally a breath of fresh air to be living here. It's amazing.
Sounds amazing and beautiful. And thank you so much for finding time and for being here and sharing your story with our audience. And I know you're helping many, many people out there. And I can't wait for our interview and to ask all the questions and get all the information that we can have on our fingertips. So thank you again.
You're welcome. Very welcome.
About your background and where you grew up.
So yeah, as I said, I was born in London and I grew up in the suburbs and had a very dysfunctional upbringing. Just a lot of craziness, a lot of violence in the house. And as a result of that, I was a kid who grew up with not a lot of self-worth, not a lot of self-belief. And to get my kudos, I'd run around with gangs on the street, and, I was into drugs and, got into lots of fights as a kid and got arrested a few times. And it wasn't a very happy time in my life. And, as a result of that, when I came into adulthood, I didn't exactly set the world on fire because I had a lot of negative conditioning from my childhood. In my school, I was kicked out when I was 15. So I was kind of looking unconsciously to fix a lot of the negative programming that I picked up from my childhood and the conditioning, because, I was failing at relationships. I was failing in any kind of work, any kind of career I tried. I just couldn't hold anything together. And I knew there had to be a solution, but I just didn't know what it was. And it was a number of years later, I'd learned to play the guitar, and I was playing in a club, and we shared the stage with a stage hypnotist. And it was watching this guy manipulate the audience and using hypnosis in a very powerful way that kind of sparked my interest in it. But I didn't want to do the stage thing. I didn't want to do the entertainment thing. It was more about the power of hypnosis and the power for transformation that really turned me onto it. And from there, I did a diploma with the British School of Clinical Hypnosis in London. Took to it like a duck to water. I loved it. And as I learned hypnosis, I started to heal a lot of my own dysfunction. At that time, I stopped smoking, I stopped drinking, I got fit, I got healthy. I became vegetarian and then vegan. And life started to improve. I started to meet more positive people. And as I was healing myself, I then, started to be good at helping other people, because I had that experience of going from struggle and difficulty into, one of a more positive lifestyle. And, I kept on that path. I kept working on healing and clearing dysfunctional patterns of behavior. And, you know, now I'm in a very abundant place. You know, I've got a beautiful young family. I live in southern Spain. I've got freedom. I've got time with the kids, and I can give them everything I never had. So, you know, life has really worked out. But the key was that I was clearing from the inside out. It wasn't just the abundance affirmations, it was also the healing. If you work on those two things, you know, the abundance thing externally and the healing internally, it's a very, very powerful combination.
Absolutely. How old are your kids?
My kids, I've got one of 31 and I've got two of 4 and 2. So I've kind of done the whole thing again. And
Amazing.
it's wonderful, you know, because my oldest son, you know, he's a great lad. He's my best friend. You know, I've got a really solid bond with him. And my 2 younger kids now, we have so much fun. You know, Lee lives in England, so he comes over to see us regularly, and we have so much fun. And he's going to be an amazing role model to the other 2 boys, because
Yeah.
Lee, you know, he's into Krishna consciousness. He's very, very awake, and he's into jiu-jitsu. You know, he loves that. So he's got a very disciplined life, and he's in a very good place. So the 2 boys, you know, it's very important for boys especially to have strong role models other than their parents. And they've got that with Lee. So I'm very lucky that we're doing it all again. And, you know, Lee's very much a part of that.
And I'm sure you're extraordinary and empowering parent, because what you had in the past, and it's like, I can speak for myself as well, we really want to do best and provide best and give them what we did not have growing up.
I was just going to say the same thing. You know, you always want to give your kids something different from what you had. Hopefully, you know, a much improved version. And I always did instinctively. You know, I didn't. My childhood was tough. You know, when I was talking to someone today about it, and you know, I slept on the street when I was 12 at times. You know, and in cold South London, and yeah, you know, the thought of my boys doing anything like that would fill me with dread. So yeah, my whole focus is on bringing up really strong, you know, sensitive men who are in their own power, you know, but not in their ego, you know, in their own strength, their masculine strength. I understand that sort of concept. And my wife is very, very good as well. You know, she's very much into the divine feminine. And so she's teaching the boys what it is to be a strong, empowered woman. You know, whereas, you know, my example was I just saw my mum losing it and going crazy a lot of the time. So it's nice. They're going to have, that's the key with, you know, kids, I think, for them to have strong role models. And, you know, because you're their blueprint, you're showing them how it's done. You know, every you know, the relationships you have, how you treat other people, they're learning from you. So if you're doing it the right way, they're picking up that, and they're going to respond to that. So yeah, it's so important.
So going back to that negative space and growing up, and you mentioned being in the streets. So were you in a dysfunctional family with dysfunctioning parents? Was it your bad choices that you made growing up? Or-
I was a product of my environment. So my home life was very chaotic and crazy. And it's funny, my best friend who lived over the road, he described it years later as like a Tom and Jerry cartoon. It was crazy. You know, there was literally my mum whacking me around the head with a frying pan or throwing things at me and screaming. And so I was so unhappy at home. I used to run away, you know, and sometimes I ran away, sometimes I got kicked out. But it's strange, you know, because I was a 12-year-old kid walking around the streets, you know, and it was freezing at times. And sometimes I slept in phone boxes. I slept in the woods once. I slept on park benches, and, you know, I was this little blonde 12-year-old kid, and I was lucky I never got picked up. But it was a very crazy time, but I never knew it was wrong. You know, when you grow up in that environment, you don't really know it's wrong. It's just what you're in. So it's only years later I understood why I struggled so much as in my young adult life, and the therapy side of it has, you know, been a real blessing, because it's helped me to completely transform my life. You know, to one of, like I said, abundance and happiness, where it was always struggle and hardship. And I struggled to make friendships. I struggled to communicate even back then. I was really lacking in so many ways. So the contrast has been great. And it's with that knowledge, it's like real life knowledge. And so as a therapist now, I'm not helping clients from my knowledge through textbooks. It's from my real life experience. And so, if anyone's got an addiction or they're stuck in some way, I've been there. I know what it's like, and I know how to get out of it as well. So that's the.
And
key.
I don't think you can really find an instruction in the books, but what makes it real, because you definitely lived through this and you overcome all those challenges, and you're truly blessed that your life took a really great turn. Now you're happy and functional. You have functional, great family. There's many others who might not make it and might not willing to take or do the work or be, and the life could end very sad and very soon. So it's a very serious subject.
I know people who I grew up with, ended up in, very bad places, and I think, my saving grace was that I wanted to get out of the hole as I was in. I didn't want to stay broke. I didn't want to stay struggling in relationships. I wanted to fix all that, but I just didn't know how to do it. And it was really when I found hypnotherapy that I found a tool to get to the heart of those problems and to transform my life. And it was really, I worked hard on that. It's like I always say to people, if you wanted to build a great physique, you work out 3 or 4 times a week and you exercise a lot, and, your physique tones and you get the result. And the mind is the same. If you want to get on top of things, you want to do the clearing, you want to get sharp, you want to be abundant, you have to do that internal work. And it is through meditation and self-hypnosis that you can do that. You can do that, transformative work. And that was it for me. I remember years ago, I was living in South London at the top floor of this really poor tower block, and like the bins at the base were being set on fire every night, and it was horrible. It was, the lift stunk of urine, and it was you couldn't have got much lower, and we lived right at the top floor at the time. And at the time I just started to get into visualization and abundance. And so I went, and the thing was, don't put a limit on it. So I started to visualize myself in an Aston Martin, driving this Aston Martin, feeling the wheel. And I did it for a couple of years. And I even had a picture in my computer of this Aston Martin. And it was about 10 years later, I went to buy an Aston Martin. I'd carried on doing that work, and life had turned around so much. And I hadn't noticed the transformation. But when suddenly the day I went to buy it, that picture came out of my computer, it popped up. I thought, wow, I used to visualize this when I was living in the tower block. And it seemed impossible. It seemed absolutely impossible that somebody with no career, no qualifications, no money would go from that to driving an Aston Martin 10 years later. But I did it. And it was the internal work that enabled me to do that. If I hadn't have done that internal work, I would never in a million years have been able to make a success of my life. And it was a really joyful moment. It was just one of those special times. But anyone can do that. If you do the internal work and you're you go very deep with it, and you really do the clearing, the conditioned patterns of behavior, the things you picked up from your childhood that no longer serve you, those beliefs about ourselves that, are not, they're just inherited. Once you get rid of those and you start to build your confidence, your self-esteem, and you start to see the world through different eyes, and, project out this abundance and this love from your heart as well. The love things, as my career's gone on, I've realized how important that is. And I infuse my recordings with this feeling that people really can love themselves unconditionally. Because if you did grow up in a crazy, mad household like we've done, love wasn't always a high priority, but it's so important for kids. We smother our kids in it, and you can, even now at their age of 4 and 2, you see the results from it. They're so naturally loving themselves. They give it out themselves. They're always kissing, even waiters in restaurants, they want to give them a hug, So it's what you put in, it's what you put into those kids that
Absolutely.
makes it magical.
I keep asking myself a question. How did I turn out okay? Seriously, like how how did it happen? And just kind of going back to what you said, it's really being willing to do the work and taking that first step. Because to give you some background, I did not have an addiction personally, but I grew up in a household with alcoholism. Dad passed away at age of 59 because he drank all his life away.
Yeah.
And I, like you said, never seen my dad in a different way. And it really affected me in multiple directions. I
Mm.
support or love or help with school, or it was never really a family. Growing up, I just remember having my dad drunk on the couch week.
Mm.
We're not talking about just, have a glass of wine and have a good time. There was not about good time. And I
No.
couldn't understand why he was doing that. Like,
Mm.
and growing up in Belarus, I'm from Eastern Europe, it's very common because
Mm.
families, like average class families, and they don't really have a lot of life opportunities how we have in the United States right now. But in Europe, it's a really hard life. And
Mm.
works hard. So I don't know, maybe he felt trapped, but
Mm.
he has responsibility of having small children and doing that and not giving support to my mom. Later on, he kind of realized that when he got really sick, he stopped drinking, but it was so bad.
Mm.
And he would turn into a monster. Like
Mhm.
an absolutely loving father when he's sober. He knows how
Mm.
to cook. He would make a good meal. He could be a good man, but
Mm.
those days were so rare. Like I
Mm.
remember him being drunk all the time.
Mm.
And when he is drunk, he would be a violent and abusive towards my mother, like constant fight, constant screaming, things flying all over the house. And I would run away. Same thing. Like I would run away to my grandparents. I would constantly be embarrassed by my parents. And it was
Mm.
healing and awful
Mm.
feeling. And we tried to cure him so many times and we tried a lot of different things, but he was not willing to do the work and
Yeah.
it didn't work.
It's got to come from the person, hasn't it? It's got to
Yeah.
come from that, and they've got to recognize the problem. And sometimes, sometimes men can struggle with that, looking deep inside, because, my dad was similar, not, he was never violent, but he was a borderline alcoholic, and, but he would never be willing to look at what was behind it. He just thought he liked to drink, and he wasn't actually a bad drunk. He was quite a funny drunk, but he was always drunk. It was like, and I as a kid, I started drinking when I was like 13. I used to go to the pub in England, and I did the same. I copied my dad, and he used to get blind drunk like 4 times a week. I'd come home on my push bike, drunk, and I'd be vomiting on my bed, and I was like 14. By the time I was 17, I had hepatitis. My liver had packed up, and I woke up one morning, my skin was yellow, and I'd literally, at that time I destroyed my liver because I was just through the alcohol. So it was a massive problem in my family, but it covers up, it masks whatever trauma there is underneath. That's all it does. And if you can't face the trauma, then the booze or the drugs is the substitute. It just covers over the fear of going there, the fear of going deep. But the truth is, when you do go to the trauma and you work on resolving that, then that's where the healing comes. And then life does start to become much happier, and you don't have to stay stuck in that addictive pattern of behavior. And it really is so liberating. I've in my family, there was alcoholism, there was gambling was a massive issue. And I had both of those addictions at one time. But they kind of happened for me when I was very young. I'd gamble and blow all my money. I had to sleep rough somewhere because I couldn't get a train home. But I always had something where I decided that if anything was controlling me, I had something in me that I could stop it eventually. It might control me for a couple of years, but then I'd find the will to break out of it. And, with the tools I've got now, I find that very easy. But, there are, in this day and age, there are so many addictions. There's, sex addiction, alcoholism is still a big one. There's, gambling is massive. So it's a huge problem in places like the UK. But, you know, you have to look at, you have to do the inner work to overcome those issues. And that's the thing. Like you said, your dad wasn't willing to do that. And that was the thing that stopped him living the life that he should have lived.
Absolutely. And when
you know,
he realized he was ready to do something, it was late because he was extremely sick. He
yeah,
completely destroyed his body, his organs,
yeah,
and we reconnected at the older age, and I forgive him for everything he's done to us. I mean, my mom was multiple times in the hospital suffering for her life because of abuse of my dad. So
yeah,
it was serious. It was not just being drunk and sleeping on the couch, and constant struggle, constant fear and worries, and what's my he's going to look like tomorrow, and what's going to happen to us, and what's going to happen to my mom. Like, he never was
yeah,
towards kids. He was a decent dad, I would say, but somehow he would have that monster entering his body every time he would have a shot, and it would be a total different person. And in the morning,
yeah,
he wouldn't even remember what he has done because he was sick. It's a disease. It's an addiction.
yeah,
You had to treat him as a sick people.
yeah. It is, you know, a difficult one. I was thinking of a client I saw once that came to see me, and he was drinking, he said, like a bottle of vodka every day, and he crept into this habit, and it got worse and worse. And he said it was just totally destroying his life. And he said that he would, you know, was starting to get aggressive with his wife and his kids. And he was even, you know, if he was driving his car, he'd be getting road rage fights. And you could see that he was quite a decent guy, but something had triggered this alcoholism. And I intuitively sensed there was an event that was the trigger, you know, from what he'd said to me. So I regressed him back to the root cause of this event. And it turned out that he'd been working. He owned a hairdresser's in South London, and he worked in this office in the hairdressers. And he was having an affair with one of the women that worked there. And he was late getting home this one night, or going to see his kid who was in a play at school. And he was driving down the motorway, and he was sober at this point. He wasn't drunk. But he said he was driving down the motorway, and the car suddenly did a U, spun out of control, and he hit this car, and his car impacted the other car, and it killed the girl in the car.
Oh my God.
And he was so traumatized by this event, and he blamed himself. And under hypnosis, and he kind of submerged it. So he started drinking, and it submerged the whole trauma of it. And under hypnosis, it was guilt. The whole thing was guilt, because he felt guilty having the affair. And if he hadn't stayed late and had the affair that night, he would have missed the girl. He said, I wouldn't have been in that time and that place.
He wouldn't be rushing too. Most likely he was rushing, and all the events, being in the wrong time at the wrong place. And
exactly that. And it came up, and he started to cry. He poured out, and all this emotion came out of him, this emotion he buried. And this guilt, massive weight came off his shoulders, and he came out of it at the end, and he was different. And to cut a long story short, he came back 2 weeks later, and he looked different. He hadn't drunk since the session. His skin was suddenly clear. He'd lost weight. His wife said to him, thank the therapist, because I've got my husband back. And it was, he was not an alcoholic from that day onwards. So it was releasing that trauma that he'd buried and consciously he wasn't aware of, that was causing the problem, and was the driving force behind his drinking habit. And that's it. You know what, if you've got any kind of addiction, there's something driving that, and you've got to get to that thing that's behind it to cure it. You're never going to do it any other way. It's the only way to get rid of it. So that's the key.
Finding the cause, for sure. And you actually kind of answered my next question, because I want to ask you, how does hypnosis work and can help us achieve more better life, better state? With this example, I think you answered it perfectly, but is there anything else you want to add regarding?
Yeah, I mean, it's completely life-changing. It's something that, you know, if you think of the analogy of an iceberg, you've got the 10% above the surface, and that's the conscious analytical mind. That's we're communicating through our logical analytical left brain at the moment. The right brain is the 90% below the surface. And that's where our creativity lies. That's where our genius lies. You know, that's where we've got so much potential and so much talent. And it's really that, you know, when you're using self-hypnosis or you're being hypnotized, you access that part of your mind, that creative, powerful part. And so, you know, even 10 minutes doing a day. When I first discovered it, I would use, I wanted out, and I found this and I believed in it. So every single day I would, you know, meditate or use self-hypnosis for 45 minutes, an hour. And I got really good at it. You know, I got really, my ex-wife at the time, she said that sometimes I would lay down and after half an hour, she'd feel the bed would be vibrating, because I was so deep in this state of hypnosis and projecting out my goals and my ambitions. And I loved it. I immersed myself in it. And I think that's the key. You know, if you want to change, you want to clear patterns of behavior, you know, really go for it, you know, because there's a wonderful, abundant life waiting for you. You don't have to stay stuck. You don't have to stay struggling, you know, having bad relationships or whatever, you know, it's that you can transform it all from the inside out. And that's what I did. You know, I was the kid that got kicked out of school at 15. And, you know, my nickname at school was Prospects because I had none. And, you know, I probably finished up, well, you know, doing better than most kids who called me Prospects. You know, so it's there for anyone.
Thank you so much. That's a great way to put it. I also think it's a way of kind of programming your brain too, like, you know, really getting focus and doing the work. And
Yeah.
I'm sure you transfer so many people's life. And thank you so much for sharing all those great information and examples. Can you tell our audience what do you have special for them as a gift?
Yes, certainly. I've got a recording of mine called Relax and Sleep Well. And it's been downloaded, I think, 5 million times on the App Store and Insight Timer and places like that. It's a very simple, straightforward recording. It's something I did years ago, and it kind of gets you into your breathing to start with, gets you very relaxed through your breath, and then down into your body, and it gently guides you into this very pleasant state of relaxation. And I do like to guide people into a very peaceful, deep state, but make them feel safe as well. And yeah, this recording does that. And then there's some affirmations towards the end for, you know, personal strength and, you know, really feeling good in yourself. And it's a recording that people use at nighttime to go to sleep. And so, because that's a big problem in this day and age, so many people struggle to sleep. So,
and it's for anyone. You don't have to have an addiction or anything serious. It's for anyone who wants to feel in peace and relax. And
just connect with that inner feeling, you know, to go into a nice state of mental and physical relaxation. And there's also a guide to self-hypnosis in there. So there's a PDF booklet so that people can learn a simple technique to put themselves into a state of self-hypnosis. So that, you know, if you're on a lunch break, you've got 10 minutes, you can just sit there, get into that really empowering state. And then you come back and you feel creative, you feel inspired. You know, simply turning off the monkey mind and quietening that down is so empowering. You know, just 10 or 15 minutes is great.
That's a great exercise. We will share this information in our interview copy. We'll have all the links to access to find you on social media. And definitely, if anyone is looking for that extra support or someone to hold their hand and really walk them through these difficult journeys, if you are struggling as a parent, or maybe you have grown up kids who are going through some difficult times, make sure you reach out to Glenn, because he is an expert and he saves so many lives. So thank you so much for being here with us.
Thank you, Olga. It's been a pleasure.
And thank you, audience, for tuning in. We will see you tomorrow for our new episode. And for today, enjoy the rest of your day and stay safe. Bye.